your brain is very good at telling you the stories that you want to hear that justify the decisions that you make. And your
Mhm.
body isn't always agreeing with your brain. And my body, both before I stepped away as CEO and during my year away, like it definitely had some objections. And when,
Yeah.
and I even there was one point where I brought some of these objections up in a meeting, and the person I brought them up to, I was really hoping would hear me, and instead they said, "Well, I just feel insulted." And then I backed down and said, "Well,
Mhm.
I'm really sorry. Like I didn't mean to insult you." And I totally just backed down. But no, I was right about all the things that I felt, and it only became glaringly obvious a few months later in the aftermath. And so
Mhm.
I think the big thing that I took away is I have to trust my gut. And that doesn't mean I will be right all the time, because
Mm.
nobody's right all the time. I'm going to be wrong multiple times from
Mhm.
here, for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But I still think that erring on the side of my instinct is where I should go 100% of the time.
Welcome to today's episode of Think Outside the Boss. Today, I have with me the one and only Sean Platt. Sean is a best-selling author, entrepreneur, and storytelling strategist. He founded the firm Sterling and Stone, and over the past decade, he and his team have built one of the most prolific independent fiction firms in the entire world, producing hundreds of books across multiple genres. He is also the co author of the influential book Write, Publish, Repeat, which helped shape the modern indie publishing movement. And he was a longtime co host of the groundbreaking self publishing podcast, which is back online and now known as the Smarter Artist Show. So today, Sean helps creators and entrepreneurs turn their ideas into intellectual property. So welcome today, Sean Platt.
Hello, it's great to be here.
We are so excited to have you. You have such an energy and a humility about you, and which is why you were one of the first people that I wanted to bring onto the show for an interview.
Well, thank you. I appreciate both compliments. I get the energy. My sister would totally disagree with you about the humility, but that's a different podcast.
Well, she's allowed to follow the show and make a comment. Cool. So the first question that I start off with every guest is, when did you first realize that you were a boss?
I can actually pinpoint the exact moment. So I'm 17 years old. I grew up in a family flower shop, and I dropped out of high school. I got in an argument with my guidance counselor. And so I left, I never went back, and started working in the family flower shop. And shortly after that, my family had two employees. They were like the head designer and the second head designer. And my father, he got sick and he was in the hospital. And while he was in a hospital having an operation, they basically stole his business and opened up their own flower shop 1.5 miles away, right across the bridge, and took like our whole client list and our vendors and all of this stuff. So I was like, no. And I just like, I kind of overnight at 17 years old, I started running the business. Figured out I'm going to learn how to design flowers, and I'm going to book weddings, and I'm going to do all of this. But that wasn't the boss moment. It was I was basically running. I was closing the store down as like a manager. But again, I'm a 17-year-old kid, definitely not thinking of myself as the boss. So we're closing one night, and there's this just real, somebody when they have body language that is just like, I could not give less of a shit, right? They're just like slouched. And at the time I thought, oh, she's an old lady. She was probably 10 years younger than I am now. She was maybe,
Super old.
yeah, she may have been my age. She may have been late 40s. But again, I'm 17. And so I'm like, I'm trying to hustle her up, and I'm teaching her how to do this one thing, and I'm asking her to like put more energy to it and go faster. And she shrugs and she goes, "It's just a job." And I realized in that moment, oh, I have to fire you. Like, that's my job. Like, I'm supposed to be in charge of this crew of people, getting the store closed down and ready for the next day. And I have somebody who's clearly showing apathy for the job. And so I realized I have to let this person go. And I made the decision right in the moment. And I said, we closed out, and then I told her to not come back. And took care of her final paycheck and all of that. And it was just very real and very immediate. And I felt like I was way too young to have that amount of responsibility where I'm now like letting someone go. But I also felt like I had no choice. She said that like complete apathy in front of everybody, kind of with a "what are you gonna do about it" attitude. And so that was the moment I realized that I was the boss.
Ta-da! It feels different than you would think, or if you dreamt about it, or were visualizing. Oh, when I'm the leader, when I'm in charge, when that's a very different moment to learn it.
Yeah,
Um,
it wasn't a good feeling. It was
no.
oppressive. It was an overwhelming, oh, well, this is a responsibility that I have, and if I don't do it, then I'm failing my job as the leader. And I think that's part of being the boss is it's not the joy of getting to boss people around.
Mhm.
I've never liked bossing people around. And even
Mhm.
now with a lot of people that I'm a collaborator more than a boss. I know I'm the boss. And actually the times that I have failed as a boss, it's because I'm not bossy enough. I
Mm.
tend to be more collaborative and a little less authoritative than I should be given the circumstance. And in this last season, this last few months, I've really had to step up and be more behind the wheel.
Mhm. Yeah. So let's go back to that moment though when you're 17. Okay. Because I work with leaders. I've worked for leaders, and I'm sure you have too. We all have. And it's like they struggle to give people feedback or to let them go.
Yeah.
When like they struggle for it for months or years and sometimes never do it. And you're 17, and was this like your first day, like when you took it over, when you stepped in
Oh
for your
no,
dad, or was
no.
it okay? So it
It's
wasn't your first day.
probably 6 months into it. It had been a while. And I had observed this person's behavior for a while. So it was more like a breaking
Okay.
point. It was more like this is not somebody who is capable of change or of bringing any amount of caring to the role. Like they I mean, in my head, I thought, "Oh, they're just watching the clock." But then they
Mhm.
actually said it out loud. I mean, they didn't use those words, but that's what they said. And I thought, you know what? We had it was a very it was kind of a hot spot as a flower shop, and we had a lot of applications would come in, and I knew like it'll be hard for a few days to be one person down, but we'll fill that, and whoever is there should want to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said afterwards, or you're like, you knew why that you had to let her go. And it was not only did she wasn't you observed her behavior, and then you could read her mind with that, but she said it in front of the customers.
Yeah.
And that the breaking point of like, you just said this out loud in front of people, like in front of
Yes.
customers?
Yes. If it had just been her and I would have probably thought you need to be let go. But I don't know that I would have had the courage to take action that night. But
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I had a choice. I felt like inviting her back one other day would have just been destructive to the business and to the culture. Like it was a culture decision, I think, more than anything.
Yeah. And I'm digging into this. Like we've talked this before. I grew up in a family business as well. Wasn't We had silk flowers, not real flowers. And it was a lot of figurines. My college education was funded by Precious Moments and Beanie Babies, I think. Back in the day before the internet. So I grew up in customer service in a retail store. And I want you to just talk a little bit more about why was it so awful and so detrimental that she said it in front of the customers. And I want all the leaders out there who are in a restaurant or in a retail shop or even like the front desk of your office. I want you to really listen to Sean, and Sean, I want you to speak to them. Like, why is it so detrimental for employees to have a bad attitude in front of the customers they serve?
Well, especially in the environment, I mean, we're talking fresh flowers. People are coming there, and I imagine it was the same in a Hallmark type environment where people are coming into the store to celebrate something or it's a birthday, it's a wedding, it's an anniversary, or it's a time of grief that someone they just lost somebody and they're buying flowers, to mourn. But it's an emotional thing. And if you have somebody in who's basically saying, I don't care about the environment that I'm in, the translation is, I don't care about you. And we want people to feel cared about. Now, this was also, if there's a little more context here that is valuable to the story, it's that my dad, okay, we've all seen the No Soup for You Seinfeld episode, right?
Yes.
Okay, that was my dad. My dad was no soup for you. He was like, customer was not always right at Rainbows. Rainbows was the name of our flower shop. The customer was not always right. He'd be like, get
Mm.
out of my store and I never want to see you again. And they might have just been like, are you open yet? I mean, he had he had no tolerance. And when I started to come in as kind of like the face of the store, I wanted a very different environment. I wanted to communicate something very different. We do care. This is special. I didn't believe that the customer was always right. I've actually never
Mm.
believed that the customer is always right. I did inherit that from my dad, but I didn't assume they were wrong. like, like,
Right.
which is what he
There's
led
a
with.
difference there, people.
Yes. And so I always tried to make it feel like a very special place. And I didn't like anybody broadcasting that apathy. Like apathy is just not okay. And so
Yeah.
in my own company today, apathy is the thing that I find intolerable.
Yes. Yes. So share a time when you like hit the wall as a leader because you've done a lot of things since that flower shop at 17 years old. I mean, you founded Sterling and Stone, you founded a podcast, you've written books, you worked with a ton of people. So share a time when you really like hit the wall with leadership and you're like, I need to do something different.
Yeah, that's a good question. So this was, I wouldn't say I hit a wall, although I did, I guess, kind of hit a wall. And that's what allowed this circumstance to happen. But I was just tired. And I wasn't really tired of being a leader so much as tired of I was in a hole. And it was really hard to dig out of the hole. And I felt like I was carrying like a lot for everyone. And it was just heavy. And so we got hit with basically $1 million disaster within a 2 week period. And we were a small company, so it's not like Amazon getting hit by $1 million. Like it basically took us years to crawl out of the crater. It was very, very difficult. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars in unpaid invoices by a company that went bankrupt and then canceled contracts. And it was 2 weeks after the writer's strike happened. And so everything that we had going on in film and television was just stalled. It was a very, very difficult time. And for the basically a year after that was just hard. It was really, really hard. And so after a year of doing that, like I was just doing a lot of stuff to pay bills. Like I had been in my happy place before, writing books, writing scripts, talking to production companies, and all things that I had been kind of dreaming about for like 10 years. And all of a sudden I was doing all of those things. And then the results of those things came crashing into a wall with the writer's strike. And then I couldn't really give them the attention that I wanted because I had to like get money into the bank. So all of a sudden I'm doing ghostwriting and consulting, which I had quit cold turkey years before. Right. And so I was like, and I was I will never take a client again. And then I'm like, Anybody need any story advice?" And so that was a very hard year. And then my COO at the time asked me to step aside. And they would become CEO and run things for a year. And I would, go out and continue to quote do my magic tricks for a year, which was the ask. And at the time, I was burned out on running the ship, and so I was okay just saying okay. And it turned out to not be the right decision at all. But a couple of things happened. I mean, by being away for a year, I did get my mojo back. And now I'm CEO again, and I've actually never felt more grounded or happy in my position. I weirdly, the older I get, I do believe the everything happens for a reason. Actually, let me amend that. I don't believe that everything happens for a reason, but I believe with the right storytelling skill set, you can find a reason why everything happened. So there's a difference there. It's like how I feel about soulmates. Like the world has 8 billion people in it. I don't really believe in soulmates, but I believe you could be soulmated. I'm married to my best friend, have been for almost 30 years. We're soulmated, even if we're not soulmates. There could have been somebody else out there who would have been great to my life. But I feel like that's the same thing with any sort of anything happens for a reason. Things happen, and then you articulate what the reasons are, what's the benefit of it. So hitting that wall gave me a lot of gifts, a lot of relationships, a lot of opportunities that I would not have otherwise. So I hit the wall hard, I recovered, and now I feel great.
Well, what did you do in that time to get your mojo back, as you said?
I did a lot of client work, and I started out with ghostwriting, and then I moved from ghostwriting to IP consultation. And the difference there is that a lot of people would come to me with, I need help writing this book. And they would just think in terms of books, books, books. It was very like myopic in their approach. And it was very like the pattern was very consistent. And I realized how few people were actually treating their IP with the value that it had. And instead of, I'm going to create a book, it was like, how can you take that idea and create like an empire around the idea instead of a book? And you have to think in different contexts, but that's what Hollywood does. Hollywood takes an idea and think, how many times can we split the atom here? And so bringing that intelligence to the nonfiction space was really invigorating. And after several months of doing it, I started to realize I was giving a lot of very sound advice to a lot of people, driving millions of dollars in revenue while my own company starved. And I wasn't bringing those ideas to my company. My company had lost a lot of its innovation while I was away. And we were once a groundbreaking force in the indie publishing industry. And all of a
Mm.
sudden, a few years later, we were actually just doing the same things that everybody else were doing and not very well. And that was really hard to see. So I was seeing that for my company. And then for me personally, I was like, oh my God, I'm a terrible, terrible client for myself. I totally ignore my own needs and my own advice. And I'm sitting here giving my very best self, my very best advice to people that I'm working with while ignoring the home front, ignoring the IP that I've built, and ignoring I didn't have any funnels that were working. I didn't have
Were there
any.
funnels in that day?
Well, I think that I'm very good at seeing the circuitry among ideas and finding
Mm.
patterns and figuring out ways to exploit like the ideas in various mediums. But I had 15 years worth of IP that I had created that was scattered all over the place with no connective tissue among the different things. And so the time away, giving my A plus work to other people really shined a light on how much I had been failing myself in my own company. And so when late last summer, when I stepped back into the CEO role, it was, oh, okay, I know exactly how to fix this. I know exactly what to do. It's going to take a little bit of time to do, but at least I have a roadmap.
Yeah. What was it like when you had the conversation with your COO at the time, recommending that they take over as CEO? Were you surprised by it, or was it your idea in the first place, or
No,
you'll like to
it was
hear that?
not. It was absolutely not my idea, but I didn't have any objection. Like I was like, "Oh, that makes perfect sense. That's a good idea." Though I had already there wasn't apathy on my part at all. I'm not a this is just a job, but there was definitely a sense of I had started to abdicate a lot of my decisions over to this person. I had basically said, okay, you decide. A lot of the way the business started to run kind of conformed to their needs and their vision instead of mine. And so it seemed like a natural evolution at the time. Okay, you're kind of operating as a CEO anyway, although the person in that position wasn't really operating as a COO or a CEO. They were operating as my partner, and we came up with a lot of our ideas together, but they were definitely more traditional, and I'm more like, what's the visionary thing to do? What is the innovative thing to do? And so I had because we were in such a hole for such a long spell, we played it safe too long. And that made it harder, not easier, to get out of the hole. So it felt almost relieving, I want to say. And I'm embarrassed to say that because I wish that that hadn't been my answer. Oh, I'm relieved to have less responsibility, but I was. I was relieved to have less responsibility.
Yeah, and that's so relatable too. Like you're definitely not alone in that because being a CEO, being a leader in general, whether it's the CEO, COO, or just leading people for the first time, it always sounds more exciting than it is. Oh, cool. Like I get a title, I get a raise, I get to make the calls. And I mean, all of those things are true, but there's this like responsibility that comes with it. You get all the crap with it that people don't always talk about. Like you also get to terminate people and have really hard conversations, and the weight of the responsibility is it's stressful, especially if you're a CEO, a business owner or a founder. Like it hits different than being an individual or an independent contributor to a company or an individual contributor.
Yeah,
But
I
with
would add that the response so the weight of responsibility was actually pretty severe because my job, when I stepped aside, my job was basically to bring in $50,000 or more every single month independently. Like I had a very small team and we were responsible for driving just a lot of money to kind of float the company. And so my responsibility was actually really, really high. It was very heavy. But it got me out of the day to day with, so it basically, I traded 1,000 micro decisions for one giant thing that I had to constantly do, right? And
Mhm.
I had to generate the money, and that was difficult, but at least I could do it my way. Like there,
Mhm.
I could go out and figure out funnels. I could go make things up. I can work with clients. I could develop relationships. I can do things that at least I have some autonomy. And I felt like I hadn't had autonomy in a few years. And so I was just doing things that I kind of had to do. And so weirdly, as a boss slash leader in those last couple of years before I spent a year away, I actually felt more like an employee than I ever did before. Like I
Mhm.
had people to answer to and I had to ask. I was the one who's always asking for permission instead of saying how things should be.
Yeah, and I imagine that happened gradually over time.
Yes,
And
yes, it was
yeah,
it was definitely boiling the frog.
yeah. So now that you're back, I didn't realize this was recent. So it was you just came back as CEO now. So what are you doing different this time as CEO than, the first round?
Innovation. It's innovation first. It's that, the thing that got us where we were isn't going to get us where we want to go at all. And so just new ideas, like really like we had a punch list of here's all the things that we said no to as a company in the last 2 years, and they all moved to the top of the list. All of those things are working now. And it's slow. It's not like it's presto change or everything is magically fixed, but it's very steadily. Like August was really rough. That was a transition month. September was even rougher. And then like October, November, December were all like cleaning up messes that were like left in the transition, and just it was hard. We had a lot of like deadlines to finish, and I didn't know that I would be CEO again like at the end of August. It was surprising and it was sudden, and it was immediately welcome. The relief I felt stepping away, I felt that 10 times more coming back. I was like, okay, this is great because the company is atrophying and I don't want to see that. I want to see us growing. At the time of we're recording in the first week of March, and this year has been amazing so far. It's like we've hit it like a rocket ship, and things are going better than they've ever been, really. There's still a lot of ground to make up. So, on the bank account isn't better than it's ever been, but our trajectory is remarkable, and a lot of new initiatives are back. So our podcast is coming back. I'm writing a sequel to the best-selling book we've ever had, nonfiction wise and fiction wise, actually. Basically, I came in like the consultant that I would have hired. Sterling and Stone became a client in a way where I'm like, okay, here's our IP, here's our assets, here's the best way to leverage it, here's the new projects we greenlight, here's the other stuff that we need to kind of retire. We went through our whole entire catalog and said what deserves to exist, what doesn't, what deserves more oxygen, what deserves to just kind of go in the like retirement area. and because you can't feed everything. And there was a serious lack of new ideas. It was basically like even the new ideas fit into an old container. And so that just wasn't going to feed us for the next decade. And I want to build a really big, really amazing company. I don't mean big in size and people, I mean big in impact. I want to make sure that like we already did it once. We had a tremendous amount of impact in the industry, and that really fed me. And going back to Author Nation the last couple of years and seeing how much of our work from 10 years ago is still echoing today, that really drives me. And so it feels really good to be out there again. It feels really good to be making a difference.
That's incredible. So, talk me through the culture of the company. So, kind of the end of the your first term as CEO through when the COO took over, and then now, how did they react? What was morale like through all of
Morale,
that transition?
well, through the transition, there was a rough period. We did lose multiple storytellers. There were a couple that we lost that I feel were, I don't know, collateral damage. But most of the people we lost, I'm very happy to have seen gone, because there was an entitlement that had crept in over the last couple of years that is just not okay with me. It's entitlement is right up there with apathy. We brought in a whole crew of storytellers. And do you know that famous Edward Shackleton ad, which may not have really existed?
Yes, I like to believe that it did, but yeah,
So
tell everyone about it.
yeah, there's this great. I would love to believe this existed also. It was an ad that basically said, I'm paraphrasing here, but I'm going to conduct an expedition to Antarctica. You're probably going to die. There's going to
Yep.
be no food, harsh conditions, but massive success or like legendary whatever for those who survive.
Yeah,
And the ad went viral, before there was a thing called going viral. And
right.
people would stand like for blocks around to fill out an application to be one of these explorers. And so
Yeah.
when we emailed our list, our smarter artist list, and said, hey, we basically did a Shackleton ad. We said, being a creator is brutal. You're probably not going to have any success, but if you are successful, you might have a TV show, you might have a best-selling series, and we were really looking for people who fit a specific culture, because I would define the Sterling and Stone culture as a bunch of storytellers who thrive on collaboration, believe that 1 + 1 = 11 in the right circumstance, that they always will give more than they take, and that the cumulative effect of giving more than you take, it can be exponential. And I've always given more than I've taken from the company, and so have all the people at the top right now. But one of our storytellers during the last quarter of last year, when things were at their rockiest, has said, "Wow, it looks like a lot of these Shackletons are looking for pillows on the ice," and that was exactly the feeling. And none of those people are here anymore. But there had been a very slow but steady creep into the company of people who took more than they gave. And some of the people took substantially more than they gave. And so, like, it was really, really great to clean house and to feel really invigorated by the culture again. And I think culture is the driving force of any business. And I think that, if you're surrounded by people who give more than they take, you've got that rising tide. And it feels really amazing to be in like a raw environment again, where everybody
Yeah.
is rowing their oars in the same direction and they're looking at the horizon, and we're going to get there together, because I thrive in that environment.
And looking back to, could you could you identify now, because with hindsight of like what were the areas where the culture was starting to get off track? Was it with the entitlement that you had shared? Was it hires? Was it, I'm just curious, and for the people listening to it, well, what was starting that?
It was, I had trust in the wrong people. I believed that the people that I had put in positions of power, they took advantage of their positions, and that comes down. So I also feel like transparency is really important, And
Mm,
I'm somebody who I very much like to say this is how things are and this is how we're operating. So as one example, I started a separate company called Story Merchants, which now is basically like an innovation lab for storytelling. And we've got all kinds of little
mm,
things happening. And that was the company that was basically funding Sterling and Stone in a lot of ways. But
mm.
but we couldn't be upfront about that. Like I had to just kind of it looked to some people in the company like, oh, Sean's off doing his own thing, doing his crazy things, and being all like scattered entrepreneur visionary, and he left us here to fend for ourselves when really I was providing a lot of the backbone. And so I think that allowed a lot of that creep to happen.
Yeah, I love it. And again, everything you've shared is it's so relatable. And what I think is unique and what drives your story is that you were aware of it. Looking back, you could say, "Oh, wow, I trusted the wrong people. The entitlement was creeping in." And you ended up, with relief of, "Yeah, I'll step away," and, coming back into it. And that takes a lot of courage to do, and a lot of humility too, to set that aside, to set that title aside of the company you started and say, okay, I am going to take a year off. And even though the company didn't necessarily thrive, the culture didn't thrive while you were away, it does give that point of reference of now you're more clear headed. You come back and you're like, wait, this is the vision we're chasing again.
Yeah.
And I think that's like an incredible move to make and an incredibly courageous one too.
I would also add that the biggest lesson I had here is to trust my instinct more than I did, because
Mhm.
looking back, I could see several points where there's things that I should have questioned and I didn't. And I felt it in my body. But when you trust people, or, there was a part of me that was just lazy, like honestly, where I'm like, okay, it's easier to just path of least resistance. But that doesn't mean that on a gut level, I wasn't feeling some amount of discord. And this doesn't feel quite right. And I feel like I historically trusted my instincts a lot. And then for a couple of years, I didn't as much. And now I feel like I always listen to my instincts, because I
Mhm.
feel like your brain is very good at telling you the stories that you want to hear that justify the decisions that you make. And your
Mhm.
body isn't always agreeing with your brain. And my body, both before I stepped away as CEO and during my year away, like it definitely had some objections. And when,
Yeah.
and I even, there was one point where I brought some of these objections up in a meeting, and the person I brought them up to, I was really hoping would hear me, and instead they said, "Well, I just feel insulted." And then I backed down and said, "Well,
Mhm.
I'm really sorry. Like I didn't mean to insult you." And I totally just backed down, but no, I was right about all the things that I felt, and it only became glaringly obvious a few months later in the aftermath. And so
Mhm.
I think the big thing that I took away is I have to trust my gut. And that doesn't mean I will be right all the time, because
Mm.
nobody's right all the time. I'm going to be wrong multiple times from
Mhm.
here, for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But I still think that erring on the side of my instinct is where I should go 100% of the time. I should err on my instinct, but surround myself by quality people who are giving more than they take. And I think that's the formula.
Oh, I love it. That is a strong formula. Now we're going to move into the lightning round. So the lightning round, there's 5 questions that we ask every guest on the show. So the first one is, what is your favorite personality assessment?
I love
Okay.
strength finders. And so my top three are communication, future, and ideation, of course.
Of
So
course. All right. Second question is, what is a book that just one, any one, Sean, okay? What is a book that was instrumental in your life?
The Talisman. It's the first Stephen King book I ever read. I was 8 years old. I stole it from my mom's nightstand. It changed my life.
Awesome. What is the some of the best advice you've ever been given?
Personally, or just that I read somewhere?
Either.
Okay, well,
Either
before
one.
before I even started writing, I was just a fan of movies. I never ever saw myself as a writer. I didn't even see myself as creative. This is maybe 2002 or so, and I was pretty obsessed with P.T. Anderson, who made like Boogie Nights and Magnolia and a bunch of movies I love. Up for
Mhm.
best picture this year for One Battle After Another, and I was reading a blog about his work called Red Vines and Licorice, or Red Vines and Nicotine, maybe. I don't know. But he had this quote that said, just keep writing. At some point, someone will notice you.
Yeah,
And I was just like,
it's
I,
so true.
it's just such a simple thing. But yeah, that totally stuck with me.
I'm a 15-year overnight success.
Yes.
Well, what is a failure that you cherish?
Everything that we just talked about. I feel like it was my biggest failure as a leader was stepping away and trusting my company to people who didn't love it as much as me or care as much as me. But I feel like the gifts that I got from that disaster will serve me for the rest of my life.
Absolutely. And the final question, and my personal favorite. So let's say you are being introduced on a stage to talk about your books. What is your walk on music?
I know this is really cheesy before I even say it. Oh, okay. I'm going to change my answer actually. I'll give you the cheesy answer
Go for
first,
it.
which is lose yourself. Because other than Stephen King, I find Marshall Mathers, Eminem, is the most influential person for me writing. Like, I just love what he does with language. And so when I first was writing, it was like children's books, but I was fascinated with his arrangement of vocabulary. It just blew my mind. But I'd probably go a White Stripes Seven Nation Army because that riff just kicks so much ass. So I'm gonna go with that one.
I love it. I love it all. Sean, thank you so much for being a guest on Think Outside the Boss. And before we go, tell everyone, where can they find you? Is there anything you want to promote? This is it's your time to share.
If you want to hear me do more of this, you can listen to my podcast. That's at smarterartist.net. You can see all the shows there. If you need help with actual IP architecture, you can go to wherethex.com.
All right. I love it. We'll link to all of that in our show notes. Sean, thank you so much. And until next time, keep moving forward. Thanks for listening. If you liked something from this episode, hit share and send it to a friend or fellow leader. Don't forget to follow the show and leave a review because it helps leaders like you find us faster. This episode of Think Outside the Boss was produced by Volt Productions. I'll see you next week. And until then, keep moving forward.